Number 11, we almost there. Take care of your family. And you say, well, Rico, well, that's what I'm doing every day. I got some specific instructions when it comes to taking care of your family. See, because the bottom line is, we all should have the mindset where we expect the best, but we also should have the mindset where we prepare for the worst. Y'all understand? Expect the best, but prepare for the worst. I expect everything to be great, but I also got a game plan if it ain't. All right? So that's what I want you to be able to do, especially if you have some people counting on you. You need to have that type of mentality. You need to start talking to your family about money. Now, that's one of the other things that in neighborhoods across this country and households, it's a very uncomfortable situation for families that look like me to talk about money, to talk about building wealth, to talk about business. That's something that's not typical. Why? It's because that's something typically, if you look back in previous generations for the majority of us, wasn't very visible. So if it was a struggle in life, you definitely didn't want to talk about it. But you got to get to a point where you start learning new things, new perspectives, new philosophies, new plans, and start sharing those things with the individuals in your family, especially your significant other, to make sure you're on the same page, especially your children, to make sure you're on the same page. Otherwise, it's going to be something that perpetuates into the future, and it's never going to be able to change, and the legacy you will leave will be the same legacy that you were left, which is not much of one. So, first things first, you want to make sure you have an insurance policy. I just want you to jot that down. I'm not talking about health insurance. That's important, but you want to have life insurance. That's something that's so minimal, where you can be insured for 50 grand, 100 grand, $250,000, $500,000, million, and it may be less than your car note. For some of you, it's less than your cell phone bill. And people end up dying. They have to take up a collection at the church to have a funeral because their family don't have the money to bury them. Yeah, that's tragic. Let me tell you something that's more tragic. Now a mother that has 3 kids that can't even take care of her family. They got to go live with somebody else. Well, you were working hard to take care of your family, but now you're gone, unfortunately, and now your family is suffering, not only because you're dead, but because they don't have any money. That's sad. That's one of the things that people that look like us don't take very seriously. That's one of the first things I want you to do this week. Out of everything I'm telling you, I want you to look into an insurance policy, a life insurance policy, so you can be able to have something to leave behind if you ain't got no money. If you dead broke and you got a policy that you paying $50 a month, and if you die, you can at least leave them something to pay off the house, at least leave them something to buy a house, at least leave them something to go to college. You're serious, y'all. All right, you want to make sure you got a life insurance policy. All this stuff going on with the coronavirus right now, you want to make sure you got health insurance. And some else people say, Rico, I can't afford that. Well, you can't afford not to have it. I don't know how they're handling this right now at all in terms of you going to the hospital or you going to the doctor and you don't have health insurance, how they're handling that. But let me tell you something. I wouldn't want to chance it. I wouldn't want to go to the hospital and you got symptoms of the coronavirus and maybe it's something they could have treated. But since you don't have insurance, they put you down here in this waiting room with everybody else who got coronavirus, and you there for a couple of days, and you will end up getting it way worse because they couldn't put you on a machine because you didn't have health insurance. I don't know how it worked, but all I'm saying is, in these unprecedented times, it's better to be prepared than just being plain out scared, okay? Next, you want to make sure you got a will. That's something else. The older you get, you need to make sure you got something in place that's going to allocate whatever you leave behind to whoever needs to have it, okay? Make sure you show your children how to get it, even if you don't end up getting it. That's one of the things that I was so proud of when I got into this industry and when I learned a different way to think, a different way to look at life. I was so happy that I was learning something that even if I wasn't able to get rich, I can pass these principles on to my son and he could. So that's the way you should look at it, okay? Next, look at your investments and begin to plan for the future. All right, many of you, you probably say, man, Rico, you over the number 11, but you ain't start talking about investing yet. How am I going to protect my financial future if I'm not investing? Let me tell you something. You shouldn't be investing if you don't have your emergency fund set up. You shouldn't be investing if, you got major debt. Now, yeah, you know, you can start allocating a percentage of your money. Sure, you want to get Acorns, you know, or those apps, you know, where you can start putting some money in stocks. But, you know, you're not doing it correctly. Let me tell you why. If you have an emergency and you can't take care of it, you know, you wasted a lot of time, okay? If you have these debts and you're paying 20, 30, 40, 50% interest, if you have shot credit, you trying to learn the skill of investing is not going to do anything for you. You got to understand when you're investing, you know, that's capital knowledge intensive, but it's also high risk activity. When you're investing, that means you're putting your money in something with the risk of losing it. If you don't have an emergency fund, you can't afford to lose any money. You can't afford to waste money. You can't afford to go out here and buy a brand new pair of tennis shoes that cost $200 if you don't have $2,000 in your emergency fund. If you don't have a month or two in your true emergency fund, you can't afford to be going out to eat hibachi with a group of friends, you covering the tab and it's $250. Somebody got to tell you this. Otherwise, you're going to pass on these habits to your children, and maybe their world looks a lot different than ours, and poverty is going to be a lot more real for them than it was for you. So that's why we got to start being real about our situation, understanding that before I could want to look cool and say I'm investing, I got to make sure my foundation's together. Do you understand investors, people who are actually building wealth from investing, have all these other things together? Do you think they moved into a big home and travel the world and do whatever the heck they want to do when they want to do it because they just went from being broke to investing? No, they got everything else in order. But there are opportunities out here, and people make you believe that that's the way it goes. No, there's steps to this thing. There's levels to this thing. And if you can't figure out the first step, which is budgeting and debt elimination and good credit, you don't deserve to make it to the highest step, which is investing in wealth building, because you got to go up the steps. Does that make sense? All right. So as you start looking at your investments and you become a homeowner, maybe you start investing into a few properties, you're going to start taking care of your family.